Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been declared the winner of the country's highly disputed election with over 97% of the vote, officials there say. However, the scale of the win will only amplify widespread concerns about the election's validity. Hassan's main two rivals had been barred from running, and the October 29th poll was marred by protests and violence. Some reports say hundreds have been killed, but there have been no confirmed numbers amid an internet blackout in the East African country. DW East Africa correspondent Sella Oneko is monitoring the situation in Tanzania from neighboring Kenya, and she joins us now. Sella, what's the situation in Tanzania now after this claimed victory for Hassan?
Well, it's still quite early in the morning, so the situation when we spoke to people on the ground seemed to be quite tense. Many people have been told to stay indoors, but there have also been reported shots around Dar es Salaam, and many people are just. They've seen the election results announced on national television, but many people are at home without internet and partly also without power in some areas, which is not usually the problem. But since they aren't allowed to go out, people are basically sheltering indoors. And we don't know how the situation will develop. We assume that the opposition will reject the results because most of the main opposition party didn't take part, and they've already rejected results in Zanzibar, which is a semi-autonomous region that announced results earlier. And we also hear that in Zanzibar, which has a separate system, the Zanzibari president is already being sworn in today.
So fair to say a sense of uncertainty there. Protests erupted on election day, as you well know, amid reports of deaths. What are you hearing from the ground there about the extent to which this might escalate?
This is what we'll be watching today, obviously, because we assume that people might go back onto the streets again. It's been difficult to monitor because of the information blackout, because of the media blackout. Journalists are also mainly stuck indoors. So that will be something that we'll be watching from here. But we also hope that there will be more clarity on the number of injured, the number of deaths, because that's been very difficult to confirm the last few days. We've seen several different numbers. The UN said it could confirm 10 deaths from a credible source. But human rights groups and also the opposition are saying that the numbers are in the hundreds.
How have President Hassan and her government responded to the crisis so far?
They have been very quiet about it so far. In Tanzania, the head of the chief of the armed forces asked people to stay indoors. They've also implemented a curfew in Dar es Salaam overnight since election day. And yesterday we saw the foreign minister coming out to say, speaking to international media, to say that they had heard of a few skirmishes. But they hadn't heard of any deaths. So they're basically keeping things very quiet.
Sella, how concerned are Tanzania's neighboring countries and the wider region about what's going on there right now?
Well, sitting here in Kenya, people are very concerned. People, in Kenya, we've had a number of protests, anti-government protests this year and the year before. So people were really watching the protests when they started in Tanzania, and also they've partly spilled. Or they've partly been at the borders as well, because, for example, the borders have now been closed to Tanzania. So traders at the borders have been standing there for 3 days, not been able to move their trucks into Tanzania. And human rights groups here are also in Kenya, also trying to collaborate with human rights people on the ground and their sources on the ground to confirm deaths, injuries, and so on. So at least here in Kenya, there's quite a concern, and we've also seen Antonio Guterres from the UN come out and say that he was alarmed by the violence that is happening on the ground at the moment.
DW correspondent Sella Oneko, many thanks, Sella.